Am să-i iau de lângă mine pe prietenul Roberto Quaglia, care vine de mult în România, care este scriitor italian, dar a publicat și în România, și alături de el un monstru sacru al SF-ului mondial, domnul Robert Sheckley, prezent în această enciclopedie gigantică lui John Clute, o să o arăt mai târziu în imagine, e așa o cărămită de câteva kilograme, și scriitor britanic Ian Watson, și domnia sa a fost președinte al Societății Scriitorilor de Science Fiction. Există o societate mondială a scriitorilor de science fiction. I shall start from remembering that the first time I met you, it was in San Francisco, and you were bravely defending a refrigerator because there were 3 bottles of whiskey inside.
Ooh.
You were president of the World Science Fiction Society.
Oh, I would never defend whiskey. I prefer wine and beer anytime. I did run a hospitality suite for the Science Fiction Writers of America in Holland, which was raided and emptied. So this is why I would be defending a refrigerator.
In this Anticipația, it's a very old collection of stories. It's nearly half a century old, and we restarted it. We started it again, and you have a wonderful story here inside, which is something about a time machine. That's a Wellesian idea, no? And that's a very slow time machine, the one I have here. Wonderful story, really.
Thank you.
But actually, you were known mostly for your novels more than your stories.
Well, this is true, but I love writing short stories, and in fact I've written about 150 of them. And if I had to choose between one and the other, I think I would prefer to write short stories. First of all, because you finish them more quickly and get a more immediate sense of satisfaction. But secondly, you can come slightly closer to perfection, possibly, in a short story, whereas you always feel that you have abandoned a novel rather than finishing it totally.
Will the same idea suit to you, Mr. Sheckley? I mean, let me tell you that Cheap Budget, for instance, my thinking, was so much talked about in Romania. I published it in an almanac. It was very difficult to publish science fiction stories 20 years ago, and it was turned around. And then the spy story, the small spice you put on a spaceship and sent to an asteroid also, or the love story on a meteorite again, when a bride-to-be was sent in a box there. So funny stories. They didn't appeal politically, but taken all together, they were important. Another world was drawn in front of our eyes. How do you feel about stories and novels?
I've always liked short stories better because a novel, I often feel there's too much room there for me to do what I've learned how to do writing short stories. And as Ian said, you can finish them faster and get satisfaction also.
That's an idea to be kept about. Romanians love culture, but you know there are different drawers, niches of the culture, and where to enter. That's the question for right now. You are mostly an essayist, I would say. Your books are kind of essays.
Well, the recent book that has now appeared in Romania was a collection of essays, and actually for several years I had given up fiction for essays. Actually, I didn't really know that I was writing essays. I was just writing a piece every month for an Italian magazine. And then I discovered that I had written a book of essays after that it had been published. But now I'm going back to fiction that is more satisfying in a way for me also.
I feel that, you know, the time for fiction, for stories, has come back. People need dreams talked about. You know, you need a dream. You enter the dream. There is something inside, a plot, characters turning on. This huge encyclopedia. It will be a battle between both of you, and Roberto and myself will be referees. For instance, Robert Sheckley, page 1000 and something, I don't know, 1096. And you have here 1, 2, 3, 4 columns and a quarter, whilst Jan has only 3, 1, 2, 3 columns. So it's a competition, actually.
Yes.
Who is more important? Yeah. All writers of the world are here inside this book. Most of them at the very moment when I got this book. Do you feel that your work is important in the civilization, in the culture?
Well, I think that it's important as parable or as cautionary tale rather than as prediction as to just what will happen next.
So you wouldn't say that, well, I'm important, I did that, people took care. You have a lot of books have appeared with your names.
Yes.
In the world, so a lot of people read it. So
I'm very happy to have done this work, and it's the only work I ever want to do. I don't like to say it's not important, but I don't feel important for having done it.
I asked the same question as Joe Haldeman. You wrote that story about the Forever War. Do you feel that when having 500,000 copies, you really put it inside the hearts of the people that the Forever War is dangerous? No, he said, I didn't feel that. I liked to write the book and that was that. But it's more than that, isn't it?
Well, I like to change people's perception of reality a bit by turning things upside down and inside out, so that people will get a kind of shock of recognition of the world, but in an entirely different way to what they imagined it previously that it was. So I like to deliver little psychological shocks to people.
Do you do it on purpose, or it just happens?
Well, it happens because I tend to think about the world in a slightly twisted and perverse way. So my stories become a little bit peculiar, and people read them and they say, and then they think, maybe there is some truth in this. And then they go away slightly changed and they view the world in a different way for at least another 2 hours, or perhaps 2 days or 2 weeks.
In that embedding, the novel embedding, it starts normally, it seems like a normal novel about future, but it has turns, and twists where you feel the psychological ideas inside.
It was one of the, I think it was the first novel that actually used modern scientific linguistics. And then there was a very heavy left-wing political bias in it, which rather shocked the Americans when they read it. Plus there was anthropology and a number of other things in there which were a little bit unusual at the time.
Mr. Sheckley, you were out of the hard science fiction all the time. You cannot find in your books a machinery, you enter, it has wheels and cogs, it moves and does
Yes.
It looks like, you are simply doing being funny into that. But it's much more than that, isn't it?
Well, I don't ever think it's my place to comment on how serious it is, and when I write it, I'm out to have fun with a story. Other people comment on what it means.
The Pilgrimage to Earth.
Yes.
I have it here. I have in French, a friend of mine, actually an ex-minister of industry, who is a fan of science fiction. Here it's only French, so he bought all your books in French. He has 1 cubic meter of books. At least a quarter of them has been written by you, because you did a lot of things. And he gave me that. That's why I'm having them in French on the table. And the Pilgrimage of Earth is, as French translated them, Pèlerinage à la Terre.
Yes.
It's a very interesting story, I should say. Will the Earth be like that? Will the Earth be only a holiday place sometime in the future? As Roberto comes here at Atlantic Ron near Czernavoda for a funny holiday place, but we're a very serious place.
Well, in a sense, sometimes it seems so. Also, if you will allow for the exaggeration that a story, brings. Obviously, the Earth will have a lot more, but that's a very salient aspect of it, the holiday aspect of it. So I think it's turning that way now, really.
It's more than the holiday thing, because here the character is sent. Actually, everything is happening only inserting some dreams in his brain.
Yes.
He is being sent somewhere with a very beautiful girl, so on, etc. But he will be on the same place, not moving from. Actually, in the last years, the research being done on the brain opens immense perspectives.
Yes, yes. I think so. I think that the story idea is a kind of a shorthand way of saying that. It's shorthand because it's a specific example of the sort of thing that might happen if the entertainment aspect of things goes on.
Roberto, you were very young when the first man made his step on the moon. It's in the Știință și Tehnică magazine. You know that funny people think funny things about not having happened in that time. No, there was no man on the moon in 1969.
Yes, you will never know if these were urban legends or real. You know, that's. It's difficult for me to think that this never happened. However, there has been also an interesting movie, Capricorn 1, hypothesizing that actually in the future they will make a faked landing on Mars, which will never happen and will all realize in studio. And on the other side, I would say it doesn't really matter if they really went there or not, does it?
Well, I think I should think twice before answering, because actually it's science fiction again. No?
Yes,
it's
exactly.
counter science fiction, let me say that. I thought it happened, but I could very well think that it never did. It's just in my brain. You writers did it and put it in the movies.
I would use this example, as a sort of pretext, to start to think that actually everything that one could consider real could turn out not to be. I mean, with this example, we don't know, we will not know. Personally, I think that they went to the moon, but a lot of other things could be different from what we think.
Everything can happen. The example you give a monkey typing machine, let 1 billion years, it will type, and then all Shakespeare will be inside one day.
Well, Shakespeare manages it.
It's probably necessary to make reality unreal, because with oil prices going up and up and up, and then oil becoming impossible to use either for environmental reasons or because airfares are too expensive, you will have to have virtual reality holidays that are totally believable. A, for the people who have enjoyed holidays all over the world and who will be dissatisfied, and B, for the rest of the world who have never been on holiday and will be very bitterly resentful if they cannot do the same as the others.
In a sense, you have that now in the form of U.S. theme parks. You don't have to go all the way to the South Seas from the U.S. You can go to Orlando, where there are replicas built.
And there's Venice in Las Vegas hotels
Yes,
as well,
Venice
with gondolas.
Yes, and Romans are there, and so on and so on. I was there, and I shall never go again. I don't think I prefer books and get things from there than in carton maché, as French say.
In fact, if you go to the real place, there are usually so many tourist adjuncts and souvenirs and people dressed up that it is preferable not to go to the real place if you wish to experience what the reality was, which tourists seek.
Well, let's move things a little bit to technologies. Robert, in a lifetime, you met the telephone was okay. It was before the war yet. But the television came just during the war. The Second World War.
Yes, I did not grow up with television.
And then look now. Think about being in a room and you do not have the telecommand, how I call it?
Yes, remote.
The remote control. Then you feel flabbergasted. Why wouldn't I have it? You know, I'm poor, I don't have it.
I look for rooms like that. I don't much like television.
Ray Bradbury
Yes.
says the same thing.
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
He hates television.
Well,
But-
it puts a stop to your own writing.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ray feels that. I know I do.
But let me go on. It was television. And then it was the Man on the Moon. First
Yes.
the Sputnik and a Man on the Moon.
Yes.
And then it was Crick and Watson, the double spiral,
Yes.
DNA, no?
Yes.
And then the internet came.
Yes.
So a tremendous amount of breakthrough in the science and technologies changed completely our lives. Did
I don't know if they changed our lives morally or ethically, though. I don't think so. I think we're doing the same thing still. We fall in love, we make wars, we kill people. This is sort of where it's still at, ethically.
Will it go on? I
Sorry?
mean, we shall go on Mars, we shall go further on, we shall take ourselves as we are up there in the sky.
Well, we will have to, since so far we are not able to change who we are, although there's a great deal of work now in the psychology of consciousness, which could alter all that, though I don't think so.
Before his last days, I met John Brunner, and I asked him several questions. I put them in this science fiction magazine. He was very sad. He was. He said, you know, when young, I thought the future will be bright. I was foolish. It isn't. The world is dangerous. It will be more and more dangerous. It happened 10 years ago when John Brunner
Yes,
died.
yes,
no?
yes.
What do you think?
Well, also, John Brunner was very unlucky in timing. He wrote his gigantic, wonderful masterpiece, Stand on Zanzibar,
Wonderful.
about 2 years early. So he received very little money for it. This book is too big. Then, about 2 years later, publishers began to pay $1 million for very big science fiction books. And he suffered from an unfortunate lack of timing for a science fiction writer, economically as regards his career. But I think that all of us science fiction writers perhaps suffer from a lack of timing. So,
But Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett is a very rich man, isn't he?
Probably, I don't know.
yeah, but Terry has a desire to stop writing Discworld books twice a year and to write a real science fiction book.
Real.
Rather than comic fantasy.
I don't think he will ever stop. Well, he
won't,
will stop when God will say.
He is
that's
imprisoned
it.
by success.
Yeah. He's a very important man. What do you think? Will the world be more dangerous in the future?
Oh yes, it will be a lot of wonderful nightmares for sure are waiting for us. But you know, there will be virtual nightmares and the real one. The real one, maybe they will be completely invisible. I think there is a lot to come, and the fact that it will be pleasant or unpleasant will be it's irrelevant in a way. The interesting point is that the life will be more various and mysterious and surprising, you know. Of course, I would prefer for myself a beautiful future, but I think...
Although writing sometimes dystopias, you science fiction writers, you pushed the world to another level. You push the imagination in things to be done, That has happened. Take only the fact that now Norwegians, for instance, have the lifespan of 79.8. Or 104 years ago, the average lifespan was 40. At 40, a man, a woman were old. They were supposed to die. So it's science into that, isn't it? It's progress, isn't it? Or the life isn't worth living, then why should I have? Because up to now you seemed a little bit pessimistic. Pessimistic.
Pessimism. I think we could thank science fiction for preventing the present from being worse than it is. For instance, George Orwell's 1984 is not a prediction of the future, it is a prevention of that future from coming into existence by sensitizing the minds of masses of readers to that possibility.
Yeah, for this part of the world, the work of Orwell was extremely important. We knew by heart 1984, believe me.
Really?
It was very important. It was passed from mouth to ears.
Yes.
Not everyone would have read English, but I had read it and I told the story 100,000 times to the people there. So it helped us.
Yes.
It was of help. The same thing happened with a lot of your stories and novels too. So actually imagination is helping science, which is helping the society go up. Shall we go on Mars one day?
Shall we go what?
On Mars one day.
I think inevitably, I think that we shall. And
That's optimism.
But
I
who
think
is
we'll-
we? Is it the Chinese?
Well, it's humans, and it's very likely NASA, which will be a very uncomfortable trip there, I would think. And of course, once we are there, there's no vegetation, trees, air, water, or anything. So it'll be like a very cold desert. I think we should go there, although I can't imagine what the advantage is.
But we shall be there and we shall stay there.
Perhaps we'll terraform it
We'll terraform.
and put up a new atmosphere and get water operating and have a new Earth where we can have new wars and new sadnesses and new unhappinesses. I think so much of the point is what you can do with the 30 or 40 or 50 or 70 years of life that you do have.
Yes.
And this, I don't know if that is improving a great deal.
But Roberto, who is a Casanova of the science fiction, he loves coming here, little girls look after the writer Roberto Quaglia. He enjoys himself.
Yes.
The life will be beautiful. Why should we go on Mars?
Well, maybe to make a new TV station there that broadcasts the first show live from Mars. It would be a big hit. Everybody on Earth would see the first show broadcasted live from Mars, and the publicity would sell huge amounts of money. So actually, this could be the first thing that they do when they go there. They make a live musical every Saturday evening.
Yes. Yes. So much of it is about making money, isn't it? And that's what Mars will have to, in some sense, be a paying venture for somebody.
Well, some people talk about preserving the integrity of the Martian environment. I think this is a lot of nonsense. You should have Italian coffee bars on Mars as soon as possible.
Yes.
But one serious reason for going there is that it's a little foolish to keep all your eggs in one basket. And Earth is very vulnerable to all sorts of things. Asteroid strike, global change, sudden ice ages. We assume because we have a recorded history of 6,000 years that is going to continue, and it won't. It
will be different, yeah. Kim Stanley Robinson put things down. He made a kind of it's a very interesting book. It is not a novel, well, 3 novels as he put them. It's mostly a kind of a semi-scientific, demi-scientific agenda of the future. Look what we can do. And at a certain moment he says, no money there. It will not be for profit. Mars will be a heaven, paradise. Or
yes.
something. It may be. It might be.
Well, there will always be a lot of people who will pay if they are allowed to go there. So,
oh yes,
just to have been there.
Maybe we will be exporting tourists to Mars.
We shall.
Yes.
Well, rather than prisoners or suicidal volunteers, you might actually get billionaires paying to go to Mars.
Oh, I think so.
Yes.
I think so. I think that that there should be a Mars exhibit on Mars, built around Ray Bradbury's ideas of it.
Of the canals and everything else.
That's what I would like to
You should have a theme park on
see,
Mars
yes.
which represents the true Mars of the imagination.
Yes, and why stop there? Why not have Edgar Rice Burroughs' Venus then?
Yeah, good. Maybe one day it will
Yes.
happen. Robert, you are very fond of robots. You love your robots in your books.
Yes,
we
I have a
are in a
fondness
world
for
of
them.
robots now.
Yes.
We have something on Earth like 100,000 industrial robots working
Yes.
in industries. It's wonderful, very good, very efficient work, good run. Well, but no jobs for blue collars after that, for workers, no?
Well, that's only now. As the population falls, as we've been assured that it will, there'll be more need for robotic labor.
Without robots we shall not live, shall we?
Who knows the answer? Well, actually, the point is that the direction is that one, you know, and I don't know if it can be reverted, if not with a catastrophe. I mean, catastrophe would allow to a minority to continue in a completely new way, and so either we continue with robots and with mechanization and something, or we go back to the
Catastrophe, that's a scenario that could happen, but
well, we all hope that it doesn't.
let's
No,
hope it
we
doesn't.
need them now to do the stoop labor that we can't hire people to do, to pick tomatoes and all that.
Will they pick tomatoes? Can they, with the 3 fingers and pick the tomatoes?
We can make it work.
But maybe genetic modification will allow in the future tomatoes to be picked by themselves, you know, to
That's
make
it. That's
little
more than
legs that allow the
but we're
tomatoes to...
somewhere else with this idea. Actually, I remember we had in Romania and in other socialist countries all kind of scientific socialism lessons, you know. It was, and I raised the problem one day. We have now the dictatorship of proletariat. It was Karl Marx said.
Yes.
The proletariat, the workers should dictate. Well, what's happening now on the world is less and less workers, less blue collars, and more robots.
Dictatorship of Microsoft Windows.
Microsoft, that's one idea. And Japanese robots. What's the name of the robot company in Japan? It's Toshiba, but it's not only Toshiba.
But the interesting thing is also that in the future we will have nanotechnological robots. This means invisible robots. So it could be the dictatorship of the invisible robots. You know?
We shall have them because 10 years ago, you science fiction writers started saying, writing stories about them. So there will be nanobots, nanobots.
The whole idea goes very far back, though. It goes back at least as far as RUR, Karl Kapek, I think, you know, Romson's Universal Robots.
Yes.
That was written when? In the 1920s, I think.
But
It will tell you in there.
It probably will,
it is
yeah.
in there. It's a lot of it is in there, but I bought it 9 years ago, I think, or 8 years ago, and since then, the science fiction writers put some 300-400 pages over what John Clute and Peter Nichols did. Well, we are working now inside ourselves. We know how to tinker the DNA.
Yes, we don't know how to change consciousness.
We don't know.
That's perhaps one of the next frontiers, I would think.
I agree.
And to change motivation and to change greed.
And then the question is whether you do it voluntarily to yourself out of a menu of possibilities, or whether it is done to you, perhaps without you realizing.
Yes. Maybe.
But then who's in charge? Who's on top setting up the programs?
Well, what's that on top? On top. In science fiction, your books, what do you mean on top?
I mean, somebody has to say,
A king, an emperor.
Or a top scientist,
Top scientist.
or the head of NASA, maybe.
Or a secret occult
Yeah, somebody always
conspiracy.
has to say what the program aims for. None of these things have inherent aim.
Well, let's go a bit down from the throat down. We are tinkering the DNA. It means we can build our own livers new. livers, new stomachs, new lungs, new heart. It
But
means
they don't make you
130 years old.
It's true, but I think that in a way that would miss the point. Having those things new doesn't make you happy. Isn't that what, in a sense, what people are after? It's certainly what, Winston Smith was after.
Yeah, but there is a Russian novel called Oblomov.
Yes, yes.
About a very lazy man. He was very happy. So what does happiness mean?
That was perhaps that was the main fantasy, though, that he was very happy.
Perhaps unhappiness is the trigger towards innovation, imagination, evolution, and development.
I have a friend in my UNESCO commission where I work, and he speaks 8 languages, 8 cultures. He knows very well. He's unhappy all the time, but he's scared mostly about the moment when he will not be unhappy.
Really?
That's, it's a very important point. Sometimes he's very unhappy because he didn't have any reason to be unhappy. So people are very, very complicated things.
Well, psychologically, that would be called a double injury. You're not only unhappy, but you're unhappy about the possibility that you might become not unhappy. Is the double part of the injury.
If you become totally happy, you should become very suspicious at the same time that you have been manipulated.
But that would be unhappiness.
Yeah, sure.
To become very suspicious.
That's
when you're very when you're very happy, all that is put aside.
Well, you should wear something painful upon your body, such as a clothes peg, which will cause a constant low level of pain. This is rather like the slave standing behind the Roman emperor saying, "You are only human." But in this case, it is a little pain saying, "You are unhappy. You are a little unhappy."
But that's how it is now. You have a voice in your head saying, "You're really not perfectly happy."
Let me close the chapter, Roberto, and I want to ask you. You know a guy called Arthur C. Clarke.
Yes.
It happened that you met here.
Yes. Yes.
He had a crazy idea about a
Space elevator.
Space elevator going up. And in the magazine Discover, which is a serious one, the elevator was drawn there. There is a guy called Brad Edwards, I think, and he says, "I need $6 billion, which is nothing compared to the Apollo project, $100 billion, or the International Spaceship, which will be nearly $200 billion. Give me $6 billion, and I shall make 30,000 kilometers high, and which you will move 230 small cabins up and there. You will need 7 days to reach up.
Yes.
Take a satellite out of your pocket, put it out, or maybe go to Mars. Fantasy?
Irrelevant. It will not make you either happy or unhappy. I mean, I do social science fiction, so that's what I ask. Not if you can build this, but what it'll do for you.
Yeah, that's why I let Arthur C. Clarke on your hands.
Yes.
Well, after this kind of point of view, I was imagining that even that problem of happiness to be paradoxically irrelevant, since a world of people would manufacture their final happiness, would be a paranoid world of people afraid to lose it.
You would be worried about the Al-Qaeda attack upon the space elevator.
No, it has been calculated, from the probabilistic point of view, very small chances, because down there in the Pacific Ocean, it's something like 2,600 kilometers from the coast of Peru, so it's very difficult to reach there. Up there in the sky, you need billions to put a bomb, so it will be...
So basically nobody is going to go up and use it because all people are potentially suspects. Only robots can go up and down the space elevator.
You see, for every favorable scenario you make, we can make an unfavorable one.
Sure. I can see it, I can see it very much. I'm an optimistic guy,
and that's where
so
stories
you won't turn down.
come from also.
But you are an optimistic guy in all these books.
Yes.
No, from time to time you have something like as Ray Bradbury has in the October Count, he's sad from time to time. Well, 1 in 4 stories you feel sad and you put it in, but in most of them you are optimistic.
Yes,
you are
well, that's because I'm
embedding novel too, no?
Yeah. Oh, I am basically optimistic, yeah. I'm very strongly in favor of going out into space. We have a launch window of about 300 years before we totally run out of raw materials and the ability to get off this planet, and I think it is criminal if we do not take the chance to do so. That's my upbeat aspect. And then there is the other aspect of me, which looks at absurd and surrealistic aspects of modern technology and life. And the two things sort of balance and collide with each other.
Let me ask you another question. Do you feel the art is much more and more important to the simple human being?
Well, I'm interested more in the artistic aspect than in the scientific one. But when I say artistic, I'm saying I'm talking about effectiveness. If a story gives the emotion that the author planned, I would call that an effective story.
Will Michelangelo be forever? Will another Da Vinci come up in the future and draw?
Definitely. Yes, I think that
Mona Lisa.
that there will be more and more developments of way of creating beauty. I mean, beauty expresses itself. Humans express beauty in a lot of forms. Of course, in the past you had artists which had the privilege, in a way, the limit and the privilege of doing only one thing all their life, and if that was their talent, they didn't have distractions that would take them away from that, so that they could reach what we call perfection. Well, now is much more difficult because we have so many distractions that we are not anymore a single person, if we are aware.
The question...
More education, more culture, and more free time. Is this why the culture, why the arts go more and more on us, fall upon us?
Well, more of everything. There will be more of everything. For this reason, Da Vinci and Michelangelo will not be remembered, because either there is more and more of everything, and the human race continues to live on Earth and to evolve and to develop its civilization, in which case no one will remember Da Vinci or Michelangelo, because there will be so many thousands and tens of thousands of other artists who will have gone after them, or the human race becomes extinct and nobody will remember them. In the long term or the medium term, no one will remember.
I don't think so.
I don't agree either. No. I think we'll always need our folk heroes, even if they're not remembered for anything special.
Right. You mean that we will remember the name Leonardo da Vinci, but we will confuse him with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes,
and
I think so,
we will say
yes.
that Leonardo da Vinci, yes, he starred in the Titanic, and he painted the ceiling in the Titanic.
Also, Da Vinci didn't have a single aim. He was doing all sorts of
it was a
inventions,
very complex figure for the
as well as painting.
Yeah. Well, we took every aspect of them. Let me ask you simple questions. Will books be objects to be used in the 22nd centuries? I mean, books smelling, you smell the paper, it's nice, you keep them, you love them. Will they be like that? Will they be different? Will there be books?
Yes.
Everything will be movie or film or...
There will remain a specialist market for books which are excellently produced. They can be excellently produced at reasonably cheap cost because of advances in technology. And you cannot suppress the book collector any more than you can suppress the collector of postage stamps or the instinct to collect butterflies or whatever else.
But you do reduce the power of the book when you say that.
I think that there will probably be less quality printed books. You will be able to have them generated upon demand and possibly recycled, because it is almost more pleasant to hold an object than to read a screen. But equally, you can have the simulation of a book which you will hold. You will have smart paper which can achieve page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so which you will just download into it, and the paper will reconfigure itself. You will have that kind of technology.
It'll probably flicker, though.
Boom! How pessimistic of you.
Shall we have all kind of implants, small electronic bits here and there around the ears? And
I don't think that sort of thing will replace the pleasure of reading.
I'm not speaking only about reading. I shall put something in here and I shall hear music inside my brain, or I can calculate, the higher speed, and so on and so on.
I think it's possible. How much one would want it, I don't know, though.
There are always technology enthusiasts who will go for absolutely anything.
Yes.
So, I mean, there will be people who will have books and movies directly transmitted onto their retinas. And
that's a bit like cyberpunk, in a sense, where it's splashed straight into you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw someone today connecting to the internet on their mobile phone, and I can hardly even see where the mobile phone is. So you have to wear special glasses, I think, to simulate a gigantic screen in front of your eyes. And I personally would prefer a physical gigantic screen. There will be a whole range of responses.
Yes. Will you hear a violin, a real one, and a real violin player? Or will there be a synthetic sound which may be even more perfect, being done by a computer?
I think that's likely. Real instruments won't last forever, probably. It's just sufficient, a major crisis, and maybe the culture on how to use them could get lost. But, the sound will remain eventually. Or maybe simply, it will develop like that the people playing will, maybe they have even electronic simulation of violins, so that even if they pretend to play, actually the music is coming from a device inside, because it can reproduce music better than the violin itself.
So you must train people in future music schools to play silent music perfectly.
Yes, there will be pantomime experts, to simulate to play.
Let me provoke you to something very concrete. Find a way to solve the political problems of Earth now. You from America send some troops because someone from Texas decided that the Earth has to be turned upside down. So solve it.
It's very interesting. You should ask us, when this has been a major field of study for years with no solution. So why should we have one? Or rather, why should I have one?
Who else should have, if not the science fiction writers?
Well, I'm in favor of very small wars instead of large ones. Just as I'm in favor of small countries instead of large ones.
Both are happening now.
Well, there are still too many big ones. So I say break them up even more.
Good. That's an idea. Bring them up.
I think the problem is we still have the instincts of Stone Age man and or woman, and we have an immensely more powerful technology. So a world war in the Stone Age time did not do damage to more than a few square kilometers. So I think we've got to kind of deprogram quite a lot of our instinctual behavior, which, so I would set up a world meditation program and found a religion in order to implement this, of which I would be head. Now, L. Ron Hubbard was able to make millions of dollars by setting up Scientology. So I think with Roberto, perhaps we could implement this scheme to the benefit of mankind and the future.
Here is a solution, no?
Yes, definitely. He is speaking, however, about the benefit of the mankind, which is us, because this would be the advantage of to make money, like Ron Hubbard did.
Yes.
I don't really think that often we start from the point that we imagine that the solution exists. It may also not exist, a solution. I mean, the system will self-organize at a certain point in a certain way. I think that since, in a way, there has been a lot of jumps, of evolutionary jumps in the millions of years, and even in the 10,000s of years of evolution of life and evolution of mankind, at a certain point there has been to probably be a big crisis that either will extinguish everything on that we know on Earth, or it will, in a way, project it into an evolutionary jump that can solve the problem in another way. Because I don't see a very, let's say, a very simple way to solve the problem that the Earth experiences now with the tools that we have.
You are saying the history is turning all the time, you know, like the
It's beyond
squirrel in the...
control. I think that it's beyond control. I mean, beyond our control.
There is an illusion of control which large governments have. In fact, it is impossible to control anything. It is impossible to control what happens in a war. It is impossible to control the stock market. It is generally impossible to control.
Things are happening.
And
The history is happening
Yes.
by itself.
Yes, things are happening with unknown consequences.
Let me just say that between 91 and 2001, we had 10 years of, nearly 10 years of peace, but some small wars, as you said. It was a decade of hope. The simple man, the simple woman could
But
think,
was
could strive.
you say peace? I must ask you: was there peace then in South America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia? I would say no. There were a lot of wars, but they perhaps didn't directly involve Europe or the U.S.
If a war kills or tortures a person, then for them that is equivalent to a world war, even though it may only be happening in a tiny little district.
Well, the world is all over.
Yeah,
That's it.
yes.
We are now. Are we living now in a village?
Increasingly so. This, of course, makes it much more likely that mutant diseases will spread instantly around the world, causing the catastrophe which you fear or secretly desire.
But the planetary village is upon us, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
In a sense, yes.
Is this because of the communication? We have the internet. We didn't talk about it.
Internet is a very large thing, though I personally think a very imperfect thing. They keep on improving it, but it's very hard to find a manual for the version of it that you have.
What do you think about communication?
well, that's internet. It becomes in a way a sort of psychic meta place of the spirit of mankind. Now you can find almost all existing information and all existing background noise. Of course, the second one is 1 million times bigger than the other one. So it's a new change of paradigm. You have, in a way, to learn how to move in the noise because everything is there. I think that this is an incredibly fascinating field.
But how shall we go through and find the nexual points, the most important, the information I need? How shall I adapt myself to the system?
Ah, that's a good question.
Well, there was William Gibson who actually created the character of the net runners, people who has a special talent like rhabdomans to find the meaningful information by intuition because there is no other way. And I like very much this image because I don't see another way rather than feeling where the information is hidden and find it.
Asimov had the Grand Master, the jokester was the name of the story. You know, a big brain capable of translating what the computer said to the humankind. So actually it meant that the human brain, that Grandmaster's human brain, was at least as big as the computer's brain.
Yes. There would have to be some agreement on what that, brain finds. Also, the whole style is moving away from the giant brain idea to the idea of thousands and thousands of smaller ones working in parallel.
It is said that we only know about 15% of our brain, what it does. For most part of it, we do not know. Actually, we know the hardware. I mean, if we cut it, we know the cells and so on. But the software, of the brain is completely unknown. Some chemistry, some electric signals.
We do not know what consciousness is. We have a sense of an individual self, but this may be a complete illusion. The self does not exist when we are asleep. It does not exist when you are driving a car quite a lot of the time. In fact, when we make a decision to do anything, even to close my fingers, the brain has decided to do that a few microseconds before I am consciously making that decision. So what makes the decision? Myself? No.
I'm only told about it.
I am told about it, yes.
It has been taken. Well, it is a field of activity for this century and the next centuries too.
Yes.
Because the most complicated machine in the universe is the human brain, I think, isn't it?
Yes, well, I think so. Yes. I think that the problems involved in it will be around for a very long time.
Will electronics be put in addition to that? Shall
Well,
things
probably
be
yes, but it won't solve anything. The real mysteries are the one that Ian has been now pointing at, the mysteries of awareness, because this is the real gigantic, huge mystery that we experience and that we can't explain. We can't barely describe it, and who knows what is beyond, because this can develop in something else. I mean, this can become mystical talk, but it's interesting.
I'm a journalist of science, but I love the moments when the scientists say, for unknown reasons, this happens.
Yes.
For unknown reasons, the gray matter of the universe is now 89, 91%, and we don't know where it is and if it exists. It may exist. Or a cell fecundated starts the division of the cell in 2, then 4, then 8, and so on. For unknown, so some God should put a finger into that and start things.
Let's try to get back into origins of things, isn't it?
Yes.
Why this happens in the first place.
Who did that?
Who did that? Well, there are a lot of people who would say it was God.
It was God.
Where did God come from?
Last year I was at a UNESCO conference in Paris. There were 5 Nobel Prizes, physicists, all of them, bright minds. And one of them said, I'm a believer, I trust in God, I go to church. I cannot turn my back to it. Religion, yes, it exists. God, yes, it exists. Do I have doubts? He asked the audience. You bet I do. If God exists, why doesn't he manage things at all? Why are we, the humankind, so bad? Why are we making so many wars, poverty, and so on and so on?
Well, as soon as he asks why, though, I think he's ascribing a false argument to the idea: is there a God, or not? You can believe in a God without having to believe. In that case, why does he do this and why does he not do that?
You remember that wonderful story of Arthur C. Clarke again about the priest going up in the sky. The star was the name of that.
Yes, yes.
Trying to look if around the star a civilization had existed. It did. He finds the answer to the question: does God exist? And yes, God exists because he exists, but the man doesn't believe in it and it doesn't trust in him anymore, because at the birth of his son, the God made an explosion of a star up in the sky, and that killed the civilization. So the monk, actually, the priest, comes back and he doesn't trust God anymore.
It's possible that God will only come to exist in the far distant future of the universe, when we have evolved and other aliens have evolved into super intelligences, which then fuse together and generate a God which perhaps creates the universe from which we have emerged.
Maybe it's happening now. Maybe it has happened, and we are only a small pocket of free thinkers. We think about ourselves, you know, knitting here in the corner of the universe. It was a very nice evening, gentlemen. I want to thank you. I'm very proud to having had some pages from this John Clute and Peter Nichols encyclopedia, made alive by these two gentlemen here and our friend Roberto Quaglia near us. It was a story about imagination, an hour about science fiction and the future of the humankind. It is a good place to show you once more. Și am să trec pe românește. E un moment în care vă mai arăt încă o dată revista Anticipația. Vă amintiți, cei de vârsta mea, colecția aceea de un leu care v-a făcut să fiți ingineri sau profesori, pentru că imaginația era prinsă de mințile noastre ca niște bureți umeni. Aceasta este revista Știință și Tehnică, o aveți acolo. Robert Sheckley, Ian Watson, Roberto Quaglia, Alexandru Mironov, vă mulțumim că ne-ați ascultat și sper că asemenea ore să le putem avea și cu alte ocazii. O seară bună!